firmly to switch it on, yeah?
Yeah, and then...
To the distance of the microphone is a bit sensitive, yeah?
Yeah.
I would like to start with the other back here.
Yeah, we can start.
When you are, yeah?
Yeah, I'm ready, yeah. Can you hear me? Yes. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, here in Bonn in the press conference about agriculture greenhouse gas emission trading schemes in Europe and the options there are for other countries as well. My name is Jeroom Remmers. I'm the founder and director of True Animal Protein Price Coalition, founded 5 years ago. Last week we had our Lustrum conference in Amsterdam, and we've been celebrating a lot of successes since we started, because first when we started, a tax on meat was really a taboo topic, and now in more and more countries this is considered as a potential good way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and in the same time improve healthcare systems and have other benefits. So who are we? Now we are a network, a coalition of more than 70 organizations, including many food companies, but also climate NGOs, youth organizations, even farmer organizations. And they are based in mostly in European countries, but also in America and in Africa. We are also partner of some larger organizations like the Environmental Movement in Europe, Climate Action Network, and others. So we also try to influence also other NGOs in the world to also increase greenhouse gas emission taxation in their activities and mission. So I'm going to tell 6 things today. It's about first starting why is this important, and then talking about internalizing external costs of agriculture and food. Then one potential instrument to do so, an emission trading scheme. Then some information about public opinions and stakeholder opinions in Europe about this proposal. And then the consequences for low-income groups. And finally, so what can we do now in at COP conferences? And is this also a proposal which is very well fit for instance, other OECD countries who already have ETS systems for the energy sector, but not yet for the agriculture and food sector, and maybe also for China. So why are we doing this? As you know, the meat consumption doubled since the last 30 years, and it's projected to increase with at least 40% in 2050. And you know that meat and dairy have very high greenhouse gas emission potentials. Per kilogram food, meat and dairy cause a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is not totally not in line with the Paris Climate Agreements, especially when this meat production and consumption is growing in the world while it should be reduced. And especially the countries who overconsume meat should make the first start with reducing it, and taxation would be, of course, the best option and the fastest option to do so. So food systems, they cause 33% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to the UN, and according studies published in Guardian by Illinois University, 60% of those food system emissions is from meat and dairy. And the EU Court of Auditors made a report a few years ago, and there in Europe, because they eat more meat per capita compared to the global average, meat and dairy cause more than 80% of all diet-related greenhouse gas emissions. So this is a focus area. It should be a focus area if politicians take climate change policies serious. This should be included in it. It's causing a lot of many other problems like deforestation, biodiversity loss, land use for animal feed, and so there is also a problem with food security. So when more and more land in agricultural land is used for animals and not for humans, that's a big problem, and it's increasing food prices as well. Health effects, a lot of health care costs are related to overconsumption of meat, and the World Bank warned all countries about this problem, and they advised countries to tax unhealthy food products to prevent obesity problems, to prevent exploding healthcare costs, and it also included a recommendation for a tax on processed meat. This is just the World Bank. It's not me who's saying this, but this is just in terms of good government budgets. What is Paris-aligned meat consumption? In Europe, according to some scientists, the meat consumption should reduce with nearly 70% compared to 2017 to be in line with Paris climate goals. But according to the estimates that and existing policies, the reduction will be only 4%. So we need additional policies to reduce consumption. And here you see some figures about the meat consumption per country. As you know, some countries like the US and Argentina, Spain, Portugal, but also China, they eat a lot of meat, and especially China is a problem because there are so many Chinese problems, and the meat consumption there is increasing fast as well, while it's reducing in Europe and America now a little bit. So what is the theory behind the pricing of greenhouse gas emissions? That's what we call the true price of food. The FAO last year also published a large report. It's called The Hidden Cost of Food. And they, in this report, it was said that the prices of food products should be 2 times or 3 times higher compared to what we pay in the supermarket. This is because of those external costs, like greenhouse gas emissions cause a lot of problems elsewhere or in the future, and you can calculate the cost which will be there for others, like floods or droughts or hunger or whatever. These are costs that are not paid by you as a consumer when you buy meat or dairy in the shop, but somebody else has to pay for the damage or the loss and damage. And the same is true for health. So when societies eat a lot of meat, then also the societies have to pay for health impacts. So when you internalize those costs into the price of food or meat or whatever, then it's the true price, and that's the theory and our aim, that we do this like we do it in the energy systems. There we pay for CO2 taxes, there we pay for the cost of greenhouse gas emissions. At least in the Netherlands we do, we pay like a tax of 100% on fossil fuels, for gas, for fuels in our cars. So there it's completely normal after 10 years of policy advocacy to have those taxes in place and to reduce fossil fuel consumption. But we have to have exactly the same elements in the food and agriculture sector as well. So here were some calculations made in a report we published last year. So climate change is just one of the environmental problems of meat and dairy consumption. So there's also particulate matter that causes a lot of healthcare costs. It's also water pollution, air pollution, land occupation, toxicity. They're all elements which harm. There's some cost elsewhere, and this can be calculated and included in prices. And if you do so, this would be the extra cost per kilogram beef, for instance. So there's 10 euros per kilogram extra, which is more than doubling the price what we pay now. But for eggs and milk, it's less, but it's still significant. And now I will tell about the proposal from the EU Commission, DG Klima, the Directorate Klima. Last year they presented a new report by Trinomics Institute, who described some options of emission trading schemes in the agriculture sector. And so this sector is the only one not yet part of emission trading scheme. So we have it now in place for energy, for industry. In 2027, there will be also an ETS number 2 for transport and housing. But agriculture and food is the last sector without any form of pricing of this emission. So that's why the Commission made a first report on how can we do that, because we need also to include the polluter pays principle, which is an accepted principle in environmental policies in Europe for 50 years. And we have now finally to include this principle into policies, according to also the Farm to Fork strategy. So this report was published in November, and there were 5, or basically 3 options that were considered. So one is that all farms, the on-farm ETS, so at farm level they have to deal with this new ETS system. That's one option. The second is the upstream option, and the third one is the downstream option. So upstream means that the fertilizer companies and the feed companies have to be included in the ETS. And the downstream option is that the slaughterhouses and the dairy factories have to be included. So these are the 3 options, and there are some 2 options in between. But those 3 options are the most seriously. Our organization supports the downstream option, that slaughterhouses and dairy factories would be included and not the farmers. In theory, it would be better that farmers would be included, but in practice, it will be really difficult. And there's also a risk that the increased price for them will not be transferred to the next chain, not to the consumer, but the farmer's income will go down. And but there are also other reasons why it's maybe better that the slaughterhouses and dairy factories would have to pay the cost for it. And here you see also, in theory, the pros and contras for each option. So you see at the most right side the downstream option that has also a lot of green scores. So it scores high on several criteria. So that's why also now the EU Commission is proposing this option. There was also a stakeholder survey among the relevant stakeholders in Europe about those 3 to 5 options, what they thought would be best. And the downstream option got most support, 63% of people supported that option. And also we had meetings with, for instance, the Young Farmers Organization in Europe, and they were in the same position as we did. The factories, the food processors should pay, and the option that supermarkets pay is not included in this option. That would be maybe also a very good option, but it was not included in and it's maybe more complicated, but I think this should be studied also. So the conclusion is that it says climate tax, but it's more climate pricing. Emission trading scheme is not a tax, but it's a legislation which obligates companies to reduce their greenhouse gas emission budget every year with 2 to 4%. So every year. So in 10 years' time, then you maybe have to you reduce your emissions by 30% or 50%. It depends on what are the goals for 2040 and 2050. But in time, over time, it's really pressing for those companies that they have to think, oh, I have to to reduce my emissions. What shall I do to do it? And if I don't do, I have to pay a penalty, or I have to buy credits from another company who has maybe some credits left over because they are very clean. And this is how the system works. So by having this trade part, that some companies who are clean and producing better, they can earn money by selling their own credits they have left over. But other companies have to pay for it. But in totally, there will be a higher price in the end for the consumer. For meat and dairy will become more expensive because of this system. And over time, when there's really shortages for this kind of credits, then the prices will go up and up, and consumer diets will change also as a result of it. That's what you see also in the energy sector, that now more and more people have solar panels because of we have an ETS system. This is how it works. Maybe, yeah, some people don't like the idea, but I believe that it could work in potentially. But I will also tell about the disadvantages of it and the pros and cons. Now we are going to shift more towards China and other countries. Could this be also a model for them? Yeah, as you see, the meat consumption is growing fast there as well. So the need to do something also for China is there. And they already also implemented emission trading schemes for their energy sector. They try to harmonize this with Europe. Also because of, maybe you've heard about EU import taxes on several products like steel and cement and fertilizer. This is the CBAM taxes. So this is linked to emission trading scheme. That prices go up in Europe because of these systems, but they don't want to import products from countries outside Europe which are cheaper because they don't have an ETS system. So they introduced an import tax on those products like steel. So they've, and this import taxes encourages other countries to also have some form of ETS or maybe other kind of taxes which equals the EU system. So this is one of the reasons why this could be also a good idea if this would be implemented in the agriculture sector in Europe, that other countries will copy it as well. Yeah, here you see some numbers for this is only for the meat consumption. But on average, you see that in the world we eat about 40 kilograms per capita per year, while in OECD countries like Europe and America and some other countries, it's a lot of more, and in China it's nearly the same as the average in the rich countries. So China should be part of this system as well, or any form of pricing of taxation of meat. So we want to form a new coalition of the willing of companies, or NGOs, climate organizations, maybe some countries who want this to be introduced. And if OECD countries and China would only have a tax on meat with just 10 euro cents or $10 per 100 gram of meat, it would lead to a revenue of nearly $150 billion per year. And this is exactly more or less the amount is needed for the loss and damage fund. So taxation of meat or emission trading schemes on food like meat and dairy could potentially also generate climate finance for low-income countries who desperately are looking for compensation for the loss and damage they face, because we have overconsumption of fossil fuels, and we have in the rich countries we have overconsumption of meat and dairy, and also this is causing the droughts and the problems in countries like Africa and the floods in Pakistan and other climate-related big problems and disasters. So we should pay this kind of money to the other countries. And what are the benefits? It would have the same pricing effect compared to a flat tax on meat. So that's about the ETS. It will lead to a level playing field for companies, and so that's some companies are making steps, but they are punished because they take the step because their products will become more expensive, while the laggards, they profit. So it would be better to have one system in place for whole Europe and maybe other blocks in the world, that everybody is paying the same tax or have the same emission trading scheme. And as we have seen now, in many countries, I think it's 60 countries in the world, there are CO2 taxes on energy or ETS systems. And the number of countries who have such systems in place is growing. And they try to harmonize those kind of taxes. And I think the same has to happen within the agriculture and food sector. Denmark, for instance, will make a political decision as the first country in the world to have a greenhouse gas emission tax on livestock, on their the farmers who produce pork and beef and chicken. So this is the first example that will happen this year, and maybe other countries will follow. But we expect that the EU Commission will also make a plan in 2026 for this agriculture emission trading scheme. In the 19th of June, there will be a big conference in Brussels where the EU Commission will present the new studies, impact studies, on how exactly to design this agriculture emission trading schemes for dairy factories and slaughterhouses. And they will have sessions with many stakeholders in the next year. And next year, also in spring, they will present the results. And then in 2026, they will develop the proposal. That's the plan, the schedule for now. I hope the new Commission will indeed, and the new EU Parliament will support this. But I think more and more countries like Denmark support this. Potentially, I think this is one of the best things we can do to reduce also the greenhouse gas emissions in this sector, because since 10 years nothing has improved in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction in Europe from this sector, because of the farmers' lobbies worked against it, and they're really powerful, and maybe this is the system that works better compared to shifting the subsidies to farmers. That's also one thing that potentially can help, but it's proven to be a hard fight as well. So now more and more European politicians think this could be another way to get these reductions in place in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. So that was my presentation for now, and we have an open letter that organizations can co-sign. It's a letter sent to the commissioners in Europe, but also to the new members of the parliament, asking for such an ETS system. And we excluded meat and dairy from the organic sector, because there might be some negative impacts of ETS emission scheme in agriculture. It could potentially have some negative side effects on terms of biodiversity or animal welfare. So that's one of the reasons why we thought maybe we have to exclude organic meat and dairy. And the nice thing about excluding it will be that it would be more interesting for farmers to shift towards organic meat and dairy production, because there's no ETS system. So it's also a way to help this sector, because they produce also in an environmental friendly way, not only for greenhouse gas emissions, but also for biodiversity, animal welfare. So we should also consider this, not only focus on greenhouse gas emissions only, but see the broader picture. So this was my presentation, so maybe there are some questions about it. Yes?
Yeah, thank you. My name is Jesse, and I'm a bit astonished by how this is presented, because I'm a farmer from the Netherlands, and I'm also an international lawyer working for Greenhouse Horticulture Association in Europe. And I'm quite familiar with the situation in Denmark and also with the negotiations on Agri-ETS. But my question is more in general, how does it work in practice? Because if I look at my farm at home, my CO2 emissions for my dairy cows are way different compared to my neighbors, because different inputs, different soil, different stables, etc. So that's the first one. The second one, I'm very surprised why organic farming is excluded, because what I see with my neighbors who are organic producers is that their CO2 footprint actually increased, while we are doing the same stuff basically for biodiversity restoration. So I'm surprised about that. And second of all, I was wondering how realistic is it to implement an ETS across all OECD and China countries? Because we see you referred to ETS, but only Korea has a similar ETS system as in Europe. So lots of questions, and I'm astonished by how reluctantly this is proposed.
Okay, thank you for your good questions. First of all, your questions on how would it work on farm level. So this ETS system is not meant for the farmers, but for the dairy factories and the slaughterhouse. So they would have the incentives and to deal with the emission reduction goals. So I expect that then. But this will be part of the research by the EU Commission. How would those companies react on this proposal? So I suggest, I think that they will pay and reward farmers if they reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, so that you as a farmer receive incentives to reduce emissions, so that the meat processors and the dairy factories would reward you, and then in this way help you as a farmer to realize their goals to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. This, of course, this can be done in several ways. I think that also the governments will help farmers like you with reducing the emissions, like giving additional subsidies, for instance, for maybe it could be increasing groundwater levels in peat soils to help, or planting trees, or reducing maybe some numbers of livestock, or shifting towards other methods, and methane reduction at storages of manure. There are many options that farmers can do to realize those goals, and slaughterhouses and dairy factories can do something else. They can sell more plant-based meat and dairy. This is another way that they can reduce their emissions. And some meat companies, they already have a plant-based part of their business, and Friesland Campina, the Dutch dairy company, has also a plant-based milk division. So these are also options to reduce overall reductions in the sector. And your next question is why excluding the organic sector? According to the research I just showed, that we published last year research by CE Delft, a research company, and they calculated for the conventional farms in Europe, on average, the greenhouse gas emissions per kilogram beef, milk, cheese, and eggs, and pork and chicken. And they found that for beef and for dairy, cheese, and that the emissions per kilogram for organic farms are 10 to 15% below the average in the conventional farms. For chicken and pork, it's different. There, it's the opposite. But this might be at least one reason why to exclude them, because they are on average, maybe there's some doubt about these numbers, but this is what our scientists told us, that this is the newest insight scientifically. But another reason is to exclude it because I thought of the risk for negative impacts on animal welfare and biodiversity of introducing an agriculture emission trading scheme, because it could also lead to further intensification. And that's what we don't want to have. So we want to also bring in incentives for farmers to help them to shift toward more organic production. And this could, by excluding them, this could help. But I see you don't agree, but this is the reason why we choose it. And of course, you can have a lot of discussion, and we have this discussion internally as well. But it's a proposal. And how realistic is it that other countries would copy this system? I don't know. I know that and maybe finally it will be many different systems in the world. That's okay. But if you now can design a new system, maybe it's good to harmonize it already at the start and not try to fix different systems. But we can have a debate about it. What is the best system? Maybe we should have taxes on meat and dairy, and that is better than ETS. But I think these are the good questions indeed. What's the best system? I see. Can I have one more question? No, it's time. Sorry, we can do it afterwards. Thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you later. I have a press conference tomorrow at 10, so if you want to be there, we can have similar questions.